Welcome to the One-to-One podcast, brought to you by the Learning Technology Center of Illinois. The LTC is a program of the Illinois State Board of Education. We support all K-12 districts, schools, and educators in Illinois through technology initiatives, services, and professional learning opportunities.
Our work addresses high-need technology and digital learning challenges, and we help schools increase access to and use of technology to improve educational opportunities for students. Our hosts are
Brian Bates, Associate Executive Director for Professional Learning.
And Matt Jacobson, Online Learning Coordinator. Let's get started. Yeah. So how you been, Brian? What you been up to lately?
Good. We just, by the time this launches, we just got back from IdeaCon, so that was a good time. Hanging out in their booth there. A lot of our fellow colleagues were presenting sessions throughout IdeaCon, so always a good conference to get to. And I like IdeaCon also. Kind of that time frame is the signal for spring to begin. So that's done. That's like the last kind of winter type conference event. And now, especially with the way the weather is going this week, I think we're going to have 3 of the 4 seasons here in the next 24 hours. But
Yes.
I'm ready for a change. It's time to move forward with the rest of the school year.
You know, IdeaCon was always one of those for us downstaters. It's like, will the weather cooperate with me to drive up there and back? But this year has been wonderful, no problems whatsoever. And like you said, the weather is gorgeous. It's really, really hard to be in the office on days like these. So
Yeah.
anyway, we have someone else who is going to be joining us here shortly. We are going to be joined by Darren Hudgins. And I know Darren from his book, Developing Digital Detectives. We worked with Darren in some other aspects as well. So
yeah, I've gotten to know Darren through our connection with CETA and the CETA organization. He talks, he'll talk a little bit about this. So I don't want to be a spoiler, but man, he does an excellent job of putting on different types of events, and that's just a small facet of what he does. But that's how I got to know him a little bit through some of his work with CETA, and then we started working together a little bit here at the LTC. And he's an incredible person to have a conversation with, and just a great person to pick their brain. And when we were kind of prepping for this episode, it was hard to kind of narrow down our focus. So it's a great conversation.
We could have sat and talked with Darren for hours. So, so without further ado from us, how about if we just jump right in and hear from Darren Hudgins?
Let's go.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Darren Hudgins. Darren, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. Really excited to be here. I'm excited to join you two, and whoever's listening. As you said, my name is Darren Hudgins. I currently am the founder of Think, Do, Thrive, but I've had kind of I don't know, you'd call it, started off like 11-year career of things. So I was 11 years in the classroom at the secondary level, taught both social studies as well as, we used to call it vocational education. Now you call it CTE. Did that, and then moved into, after 11 years, went into what I thought was kind of the future, which was ed tech. And I worked for a education nonprofit, which was it was actually a buying consortium for schools, but think of like Costco for purchasing and things. But I actually did the other side, which was the professional development side, doing both, keynotes, workshops, running cohorts, doing events, which was a lot of what I did, boutique events. And then what ended up happening, I think, is people saw me as the event person. And I had all these other things that I could do. and as an educator, and I use those skills, I think, to bring people in to show other people, but I never really showed folks what I was capable of or what I could do, and met some interesting people and thought, it's time to make a jump and do this myself. So I I still do some events and do things for people, but I also have put out different resources and done all kinds of different things as the founder of Think Do Thrive. So,
yeah. Well, and some of us may know you from your work with Jennifer Lagarde, Developing Digital Detectives, Essential Lessons for Discerning Fact from Fiction in the Fake News Era, which was published by ISTE in 2021. And the title certainly seems interesting as the world of ed tech evolves and technology evolves. We're coming up on elections and things like that. And how did the idea for a book like this come about for you?
Well, I'm kind of glad you brought up the election because, I told you I was a former social studies teacher. And back in 2016, the words fake news and alternative truth and all those things were coming kind of to the forefront, and like everybody was hearing it. And I'm sitting in the cheap seats going, this isn't new. Misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, all these things have been going on for a really, really long time. We have, over the years, especially since No Child Left Behind, continued to cut social studies, which was the area where you did a lot of that glue or critical thinking. And so as I was looking at that, and then I was looking at my two boys who were in school thinking, what is the world going to be like if there's no such thing as, fact or fiction, or ability to tell the difference between fact and opinion or whatever. And so I was like, we need to do something about it. And as I alluded to earlier, one of the people that I brought to my events that I met a long time ago from North Carolina was Jennifer Lagarde. She was an English teacher, media specialist, librarian, and we had some synergy in how we thought about this stuff. So we actually wrote our first book, which was Fact versus Fiction. And that was more about why we need to do something about this and a little bit of what it is, like what's going on, which was really the ability through social media and devices to amplify these kinds of, like I said, propaganda or disinformation, whatever that is. It used to be really hard to do that. Now it's easy to do it. And anyway, so we wrote that book. The book did really, really well. One of the top sellers for ISTE. And so, but we kept hearing from people, we need more of the how. Like there's some of that in there, but we need more of the how can we do this in the classroom? And that was really the impetus for developing digital detectives. And we also, the sidebar to that is we felt like a lot of the protocols that we were taught, like the three of us were taught growing up, like what you do, I don't know, RADCAT or the crap test or, like all these kinds of things. Those things were developed pre-iPhone. They were developed pre most of social media, and the landscape for media and information literacy has changed. They still have some good pieces in that, so it's not like throwing it away saying it's bad, but we've evolved some. And so we wanted to help teachers and students go, whenever they receive something, they need to start thinking like a detective, and really trying to drive that critical thinking piece. So that's really what happened. And, off of that, this book has also been very, very popular and seems to resonate with teachers. And frankly, we've even had adults and some like older folks' homes and stuff say, can you help us with this? So it seems to resonate.
That's great. You mentioned there that a lot of those protocols were developed before the iPhone, and how technology has really, just exploded in the way that it impacts that information literacy.
Mhm.
With that in mind, thinking about kind of like what your book is about, and then also, I mean, if we don't mention the biggest thing right now, which is AI, how do
Mhm.
you think that an educator's role has changed with this new technology, with the constant use of technology, and what does it look like now for a teacher, and what's their role like now that we have all this technology available and at our hands?
Well, that's a big one. There's lots of pieces to that. Um, I I mean, first of all, just at a quick entry point, and I can't take this idea. This wasn't mine, but Mike Caldwell. I think he now works for the University of Washington. But if you don't follow him, that's a good person to follow in the media information literacy world. He also works a little, or recently worked with Sam Weinberg at Stanford in the Shed project. I think they wrote a book, Verified. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard good things. He had an analogy he used to say a long time ago about transportation, like we're being transported into something. So, like when most of us were growing up, there were, 3 channels, 4 channels, whatever it is, and you got your information and news from what we believe to be trusted sources that you got to basically you had a relationship with every week or every day, depending on how you watch the news, and you kind of knew their cadence and you knew how they spoke to you and you sometimes saw emotion and all that, and so they were trusted, and there was a, even if they said something you didn't agree with or you didn't like or you weren't sure about, they had a long track record that you could pull from to say, well, in the past they've done these things. um Mike kind of brought up that, like, it's kind of like if you think of the old Star Trek, you get transported onto a planet and you
Hmm.
have like no background. You don't really know anything. And you're only going on the optics or the information you get right now at this moment. And that's significantly, I think, the best way to describe what happens now is something comes to your phone or your computer or whatever in that particular platform that you're using, and you don't know anything from the past. The only thing I might know is Brian sent it to me, or Matt sent it to me, or Tim sent it to me, or Mindy, or whoever, and I may or may not trust them. I mean, if it's from Brian, there's no way I'm trusting it, and I got to do research.
I don't blame you.
But but the reality is you guys may have gotten something, it affirmed your beliefs, and you magically said, oh, I can think of Darren, like I'm going to send it to him, and you didn't even look at it, you didn't really research it, you didn't really, it just made you feel good, or it made whatever, and in fact it could have been misinformation or disinformation or whatever, but you didn't really vet it. But I trust you, and so I assume it's legit, and so then I pass it on to other people, and then all this stuff spreads. Anyway, I can go down all these ways, but before, if Walter Cronkite said something, or Barbara Walters said something, or Connie Chung, or whoever, you would go, okay, this is likely legit, and that's where you began to build your mental model of whatever that is. Now it's not like that. And so we're thrown in as a teacher, as a parent, as a kid, especially as a kid, which is what I'm really worried about as they build their frontal lobes and understand the world, is they're left at this kind of four-way intersection. And actually, I was thinking when you guys, we were talking about these questions, when I went to Texas for the first time, trying to figure out how to get on the on ramp and off ramp. There were like 80 of them. And even though I had Google telling me where to go, we missed stuff all the time. Like we just struggled in that environment. And I feel like that's kind of what it is right now. We've got these intersections of, okay, I'm a teacher. Am I the expert? Or is it somewhere else? How do I personalize education for kids? Kids want to determine everything, but yet they don't have the structure and the knowledge yet to be able to make some really important decisions. So they need to be educated, but at the same time, they want it educated the way that they learn best or they like or whatever. You have a polarized country that is set up because our brains work easy when we can make, just binary decisions, basically. So you've had this fixed and growth kind of mindset collision of, do we want to create critical thinkers, or do we want to put people in these boxes that this is who you are and this is how you should think? So those are like two roads. And then you've got this whole thing I'm worried about, which is the future. Like, should we have hope, or are we filled with apathy in the future? And what are we going to do? And most of this information that's being pushed to us in headlines are pushed in drama mode. So I want to create some sort of emotional trigger and drama in you, because I know I can basically control your mind, because it's not using your frontal lobe, which is the critical thinking part. Or do I want to empower kids and adults? And then the last part that I thought of when we were talking about this is just this whole shift. If you're an educator, whether we like this or not, you were somewhat the vessel of information. Like, it was your job to get content or information into kids. And I don't like that analogy, but you understand, I think, what I mean. And now the information age is gone, really, and it's now about the attention age. There's so much information out there. You mentioned AI, but it's even prior to that. There's just so much there. What should I be paying attention to? And in a world of dis, and malinformation, it's tough to sift through it. So we need to create critical thinking digital detectives to do that, or that's Jennifer and I's opinion.
Dis, and malinformation. As a former social studies teacher myself, we would try to teach how to recognize that bias, but it's harder and harder and harder these days, because, like you said, the brain, everything wants to kind of gravitate toward homeostasis, and to like something is to be used to it, and if it amplifies what we think, fantastic. But now we have these tools that can create information, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, whatever. And a lot of people are concerned about that now with the advent of AI. What role is artificial intelligence playing in the process of, critical thinking now?
Well, again, a lot of layers to unpack there. So, first layer, I would say, is Jennifer and I, between the two books, made a really, we actually got in a fight with the publisher about it, is that we were no longer going to call things fake news. That has been used as a political football tactic to cut off whatever it is you tell me, because it's end of story. If no matter what you say to me, Matt, you're saying AI, fake news. I don't believe in AI, right? Like, and so we're not going to have a conversation about it. It's done. So the only place in digital detectives you'll see fake news is we actually had to put it in italics was on the cover, because and ISTE we got in a battle with that, and we're just like, no, we need to start calling things what they are. So that's the reason why I'm using those three terms more often. And those are, intent to deceive is really where it starts. Misinformation, disinformation, I manipulate a little bit. Malinformation is I know both of them. I know it's fake, and I'm going to completely manipulate you. So that's one bucket.
Wow.
The second bucket would be about we've created these algorithms to help us with that thing that I talked about earlier about getting attention to things. Like, there's so much information. We're creating these algorithms to help us make decisions or get the information that we need. AI is an algorithm. and more specifically, what we're in this whole disarray on right now is generative AI. So AI has been around since the 50s, really.
Yep, right.
But now we're into this one that specifically impacts education. And so that's why we're hearing so much more about it. We also have the machine capability, and we have the data, because we've been collecting data. That was the trade-off in social media. Like, you get it for free, but we're going to collect all this data on you. And that's what we were able to take, these powerful machines, take that information and throw it into an algorithm that outputs what you think you want. The problem is that stuff is still created by humans who have biases. It's only allowed to pull certain types of information. When it can't make decisions, like it can't totally answer your question, it makes up stuff. I think I don't remember in the recesses of my brain, but I think they're calling it like hallucinogen, not
Yeah.
hallucinogen,
No,
hallucinations.
right. Data hallucinations. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, if it can't answer, it's going to answer. It's rarely going to ever say, I don't know.
Yeah.
So it sends you something, again, sets people up for, how do I understand if this is fact or fiction? Like, how do I understand if this is a story that the algorithms are telling? And so it's set up this really difficult environment, because on one hand, it sends you amazing information that can get you to look at things completely different than we could ever look at before. It allows you to in a very short amount of time, take a bunch of stuff and synthesize it, which would take us for a really, really long time to do. But then on the other side of it is like, how, what is being made up, and or what is being, in fact, from some people, stolen, right? Or like what, like however you want to look at it, and how do you make those particular decisions? So again, lots of layers.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when we talk about digital detectives and the things in digital detectives, that was written before, OpenAI released ChatGPT widely and so on. So are there lessons in this book or in Fact versus Fiction or other publications? Are there things that we can take from this and apply to this new age of AI?
I feel really, really lucky, and I'm very confident, and of course I am biased, that the framework that we built was centered on not only good critical thinking skills. Again, thinking of a detective who's thrown into an environment, they may know a little information, but they have to use tools and strategies to try to figure out what happened in this particular scene. I also know there were plenty of algorithms, for example, in social media that were happening before, let's say, we heard about OpenAI or whatever. And they're although more complex, there's still an algorithm, and there's an input that goes in, there's a machine that mixes it up, and then there's that output that comes out. So what we did in digital detectives, we said, like, how can we get people to stop from that amygdala, that reptile brain that we talked about, and actually critically think about what they're reading or seeing, or having a discussion with, like, whatever. And so we created these 4 lenses. There's not one better than the other, although I would argue that one's the most important. But they're these lenses that you need to use to help you parse through the credibility of what it is you have. There's 2 on top that you can control, we as humans control, and there's 2 on the bottom that's part of society, like that you don't have control over it. The most important one, in my opinion, is, and you just put it here on the screen, is triggers. Everything that comes in from any kind of like social media, or even like scientific journals, like a headline or whatever, is designed to trigger someone. They want to get your attention because there's so much information out there. They want to draw you in so you'll read it or click on it, or whatever that is. That is designed to trigger your amygdala. It's to get emotions. There's like 8 emotions that we know that if we can get you hooked on that, we've got you. And so that's the main thing, is getting young kids, well, getting everybody, but really starting with young kids to understand what their emotions are and to unpack that there's usually stuff behind those emotions. And so what are those things? And so beginning to build that's the first thing. It's also understanding I am triggered. And if I am triggered, I need to press pause, because I am not using my frontal lobe. Again, I keep talking about that. It's because that's where the critical thinking comes from. The second lens is access. And that is kind of what you and I have been talking a lot about in this podcast, is where do you get your information from? Now, that can be a platform, which we've spent most of the time talking about, whether that's social media or AI or whatever. But it's also the type of device. Most of the information protocols that we've used in the past were all either about an article that you got or something on a computer, which is a very different size screen than a mobile device, or a phone, or even a watch or something. What happens is with those particular things are you have less space to give you that information, which means stuff has to go away. And when things have to go away, that takes away some of the clues or the breadcrumbs for you to solve who wrote it, what's their motive, like what are they trying to get from you, like all those different kinds of questions. Kids need to understand that. Kids need to understand that their phones are designed for you to interact with, not necessarily to get out of it. So if you actually look at the design of where the thumb can go, you pay attention, it's really easy to like things, to comment, to do all those things. It's very difficult to hit that X button. It's very difficult to get up and get into those other things, because they want you to stay on it as long as you possibly can. And that's all by design, and that's that access piece. So those are the first two, and you get to control that. You even get to turn off notifications if you want. You even get to delete the app. You have choices of that, and we need to understand that we can do that. Then you get to the bottom side, and the bottom side is forensics is the first one. It doesn't go in this necessarily order. I could have started either one. But forensics is really where you begin to start, pulling out those clues. Like, what are the fingerprints? I talked about date. I talked about source. I talked about author. And those are some of the ones that are traditional that have never really gone away. And so that's that particular piece. And then the last one is understanding motives. Who is giving us that information? What do they have to gain from it? It's really easy for us to be there's just bots out there, or there's just trolls, or there's just like we come up with all these names, clickbait or influencers or whatever. But there's actually a lot of, I don't know what you call them, like cousins or uncles or brother, that are different versions of all of these things, like part robot but part human, or whatever, cyborgs or things. There's white liars, but there's also blue liars. There's all of these kinds of things out there that I had never heard of, that we did a bunch of research on, to get people to understand that there's lots of characters out there with motives for different reasons, right? Some might be propaganda about, I don't know, Ukraine and the Russian conflict right now. Some of it might be they want to get you to buy their particular product. They've been paid by somebody to do it. It depends. And so understanding what are those motives behind that helps you, again, in that process of critically thinking. So, usually I'll, do a workshop for this, or we'll do it in a keynote or something, and I can unpack these a lot, but that's about as quick as I can do it for this podcast audience.
Oh, wow. That's, I'm curious. I'll bite. Blue liars.
Yeah, that's a new one for me too.
That's a new term I haven't heard before.
Well, I will tell you, one of the things I didn't talk about that Matt asked me was, how did we go about kind of doing it in the book? Well, we built cases. So we have analog cases, but they actually have a digital end. So you can actually go out and get this and show the video or show the article or do whatever, and to help teach kids how to unpack this stuff. We have 4 cases per elementary, middle, and high. We have books and resources for K2 and how to help on that trigger piece. But some of those cases are way too advanced for those kids. So we kind of like are building the foundation up. But one of the cases in developing digital detectives is actually, I'm going to give away one of the things. It's about the blue liar. And it's actually, it's a case that happened to me. And I'm supposed to be a media, literacy expert kind of thing. And I was duped. And it actually, well, I'll give away some of it, but basically, you remember the phenomenon about the toilet paper disappearing during the pandemic?
Right.
Like people were like, what is going on? Like, why are people, hoarding toilet paper? There was a police department in the state of Oregon on the coast that posted a Facebook post telling people to quit calling 911 about the toilet paper stuff. Like, we need to keep the lines open for real emergencies.
Right.
And this article's great because you can read it. It's very short, but you immediately have opinions about, if you don't already, about Oregonians, about police officers, about people, hoarding toilet paper. Like, there's all these triggers involved in this, even the pandemic at the time. Right. And I can't go through all the stuff that was happening to me, but I was supposed to coach my son's high school championship game. I was ill and I had to kind of quarantine myself. This was very beginning of COVID and we weren't sure I had to fly through Seattle. I could go through all this stuff, but I got this article sent to me and I just started going off about it. I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. What's wrong with these people? What's wrong? And so I sent it off to my co-author, Jennifer, and I sent it off to a bunch of friends. And we were just having a lot of fun with it. Like, these idiots. And so if you go through, you see this story then scaled, right? It became Facebook. And then pretty soon, and I'm turboing through the story, but pretty soon it's everywhere. Right. And when I say everywhere, you look at the political spectrum, you look at news, whatever, it didn't matter. It wasn't a left wing, right wing thing. It was everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I told my wife about it. And so this was actually I was not only sick, but it was on my birthday. So it was St. Patrick's Day. So we're almost close to one of the anniversaries here. And so that's March 17th. It was 2020 or something, or no, excuse me. Yeah. 2020. And so, this thing goes through the process. My wife ends up reading the Oregonian, which is the paper of record in the state of Oregon. And on page, I want to say A6, the back page in this really small paragraph, it had this story in it. And as you read through the story, it was the same stuff that I had put out, but at the very last paragraph, it said nobody actually ever called 911. They were trying to be preventative so it wouldn't happen.
Oh.
So my answer to you is that, everybody knows what a white lie is, right? Calling wolf. Yeah. The blue liar is somebody who lies for the benefit of what they believe to be good. So it's a good thing. Because I don't really think politically or whatever, morally, you would look at this and go, yeah, keeping the line open to save people from emergencies is a good thing. Right? That's a good, yes. Nobody's going to argue that kind of fact. However, trust in your police, all the time and energy spent on all this kind of stuff, all those things, that stuff is not great. Mm-hmm. But if you're I was duped, right? Like, and if I go through the list, I was like calling people idiots, right? I was totally triggered. I was making fun of them. That was one of the lenses, right? The trigger lens. The second one was access. Well, I was trying to be a good detective. I did look through them, and it was in every place I could find, and there was a date, and there were multiple stories and trusted sources. Same with fingerprint. Like the people who put it out were trusted sources. The dates were in line. All these kinds of things. What I failed to understand is the motives behind it. And so in that particular case, that motives piece was the key in this. They had this motive for a particular area that I didn't know. Again, think of a crime scene. What's the motive for that person to create that crime? And so again, I gave you the turbo version, and I actually hate that I gave it out because it's one of the cases to be solved. But there's lots of other pieces in there. And I think the last part I will say is, again, I'm supposed to be somewhat of an expert in this particular area, and I was duped. And we need to get people to understand that this is hard work, and we have to practice it, and we have to teach it. And in most schools, we're not teaching a lot of this stuff, right? Because we're fixated on, I've got all this to cover. Jennifer and I would argue that there's a lot of glue in between a lot of the stuff that you teach, where you could teach some of these skills and fold them in, but we have to start practicing it and teaching it and giving kids opportunities to be curious about it.
Mm-hmm. So Darren, you've talked a lot about, we've been discussing the content of your books and sort of the past tense. Let's go to future tense. Darren, what are you working on? What's on the horizon? What kind of stuff do you have? What kind of irons do you have in the fire?
Well, I mean, so media information literacy is a part of what I do. I mean, Matt can contest to this. Social studies is a big subject, right? It's not just history, right? There's the psychology and the sociology and all those kinds of pieces. And so, not to a surprise, I have lots of interests. I have a background in human development and education, all those things. And so, I do a lot of different things. I've always been kind of interested in how the brain works and how we learn. And so I've been spending a lot of time recently with even a group of people where we're kind of looking at how does not only the mind work, or what do we know now about how the mind works, and then how do we shift our minds for a more, again, from that drama side, because we've had a lot of drama in the last several years, and I feel like we're kind of stuck in that drama. Like there's actually even a trend. We were talking about this off podcast, I guess you call it, about pre-pandemic. Most people think it's starting the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, we're starting to spend more and more time alone from each other. We're like actually separating. And I think one of those reasons, not just is we could talk about the devices and people feeling like they're connected there, even though mental health feedback is they're not, but there's a lot of drama involved. And I am really kind of fixated on how can we get folks out of just in this constant wheel of being a victim of a villain or trying to hero people. Like, how do we stop that cycle that just constantly happens, even in the workplace, by the way? And how do we get them more into an empowerment role? And where they're like creators of that opportunity, or they're going to coach people, or in the case of like media and information literacy, how do we have healthy conversations and challenge each other without, wanting to, burn somebody at the stake or whatever, like, or destroy them. We got to let go of this winning. Like it isn't about winning. And that's the culture of kind of social media. So that's one piece. I also work with some great colleagues out of North Carolina, Nancy and Teresa, the Leading Edge Learning. We've worked together for a long time. So we partner in this thing we call Leading Schools. And so that's been a series of things. One being working with principals. They kind of get sandwiched in the PD world. They get top down, kind of told what to do and things, or how to do things. And then they have the teachers going, wait a minute, I want all these. And they rarely get professional development. They rarely get to talk to each other. And so we've created a really successful event for that, done it in several states. Also worked a bunch with instructional coaches, because we think they're another one of those glue groups. And they're having impacts on a lot of different people in the building, and influencing students. I mean, I could go on and on. Like, it's a mixed bag of things to do. Bottom line is, I have a real deep desire to help education, whether that's push them to critically think or be creative, or have just positive discussions. I think is what I've really been spending most of my time on. And I don't know. The other thing with sidebar is, like, I'm kind of a curator of strategies and people and things, and I just want to connect people with really interesting things, and then see what happens. Like hopefully in a positive way. This is an example of that. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with this thing, but it's fun talking to you guys, and I want to help LTC and Illinois and see what happens.
I mean, we enjoy talking to you, so we might as well record it so that other people can
Right.
get the benefit of hearing us. And nothing else, we've had a nice conversation today. So
Absolutely.
Well,
so, Darren, if other people wanted to get in touch with you and learn a little bit about what you do, or bring you to one of their schools or organizations to talk, how can people get in touch with you?
Brian, what's your email address?
It's actually the same as yours. No.
Everybody email Brian. No. Inundate his inbox for me. No. There's a bunch of different ways. I mean, you could look up thinkdothrive.org. That's the name of my company. It's what I try to do in everything I do, is make people think, have them do something, and then hopefully we all thrive for that. Darren at thinkdothrive.org is my email. Or, as I brought up before, leadingschools.org is another way to get a hold of me and the partnership group that I work with as well. And I'd be happy to help you in any way I can. Or as I said, I curate a lot of folks as well that I've brought to events. And if I can't do it, or I don't think I'm the best fit, I can tell others, or tell you about others, I guess that's what I should say. Mm-hmm. And be that algorithm, right?
Yeah,
vet them for you.
And you do use social media for good. You're out there on Twitter and lots of other places at D Hudgins. So
yeah, I'm still in a quandary about X, Twitter, whatever. I don't use it as much as I used to. I've kind of moved a little bit, but I do spend a lot of time on Instagram. I'm trying to make a visual kind of capsule for my kids. I started this a long time ago. Like, how does dad see the world? And if I can, leave them behind something. And it's very eclectic in what I take pictures of, but it's been kind of somewhat of a passion for me.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Darren, thanks so much for spending a little time with us and having these conversations. We will definitely be in touch again, because like Brian said, it's just awesome to have a conversation with you. And this old social studies teacher is, the things you say really resonate with me. So I appreciate your time today, and thanks for spending some time with us on the podcast.
Well, I really appreciate it. I love talking to fellow social studies teachers, but I'm hoping this resonates outside of our little bubble.
Absolutely.
And get you to think. And like I said, we can go back and get more deep into AI sometime if that's what we want to do, or we can go a bunch of different ways. I hope I kind of left the door open. It's great to talk to you too.
Absolutely. I always love when our paths cross. Look forward to and hopefully they'll be crossing again here soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. So that was a portion of our conversation with Darren Hudgins. And but before we talk a little bit about that, can we rewind a little bit? You mentioned a group called CETA earlier. For people who aren't familiar, can you define what that acronym means?
Sure. I realized that as I was saying it, that I was throwing out one of those education acronyms without giving it away. But it's the State Educational Technology Directors Association. And so we actually are lucky enough to have one of our colleagues, Mindy Fiscus, who was a past guest.
She was our January guest, right?
Who was on the board of directors of that organization. And just kind of in a nutshell, it helps to helps to bring people that do a lot of the work that like what we do, bring us together and help us to learn from each other, grow from each other, help us to learn from people out in the ed tech industry. So it's a great organization to help support ed tech all across the country.
So let's talk about our talk with
Sure.
Darren. Darren gave us a lot of really great information on media literacy, some things that, for me, like I said in the interview, for me as a former social studies teacher, it really hit home. When I would teach about this stuff, I'm teaching about, how to read a newspaper critically. But now things have gotten so much more advanced. And there are so many other opportunities. Like you said, it was like we used to trust the Walter Cronkites and Barbara Walters of the world. And now everyone can be their own Walter Cronkite or Barbara Walters or whoever you want to talk about. And it is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And it made me think about those voices. And like, I can tell you that I can still hear Peter Jennings' voice. Like,
Right.
There's recognizable voices, Dan Rather, Tom
Mhm.
Brokaw, those voices I can, like, if you say the name, I hear their voice. And it kind of goes to, that was where you got that news and you kind of trusted that source. Now it's really crazy because the one of the points he made was the information versus attention, where you're seeking out information, you're trying to, now you're just bombarded with the information. It's you used to sit down and watch the evening news to get the news. Now by 6 o'clock or whatever, you've had pretty much every single thing that's happened sent to your phone in some way, shape, or form. And so it really has changed the way that we get our information, the advances in technology. So I thought that was a great part that he pointed out about the difference between it, just gathering information versus trying, or even delivering information versus trying to get attention.
And I think I shared off air after we were done recording. I know people who don't even subscribe to cable TV or, book magazines or periodicals or anything like that. They stream everything or get everything off of YouTube. And that idea that we limit ourselves, we create, sometimes on purpose, sometimes accidentally, we create our own bubbles, and we have to learn how to break those bubbles. And as educators, we have to help our kids understand that there is more to the world than just our own resonating chamber that we gather our information from. It's a very good reminder.
And that's kind of the interesting side of technology, because one of the great parts of incorporating technology into the classroom is the ability to go beyond the four walls of the classroom. I know that's kind of something that's said often, but as we get onto that technology and use that to reach out to other corners of the world, that connection then makes us need to be even better at being better digital detectives as we're getting more information, because learning about the world isn't as easy. I shouldn't say it's not as easy, but it's not the same as pulling an Encyclopedia Britannica off of your shelf and
Right.
reading about the history of that country. You're learning about what's going on in that country in real time. So that's a good point.
And the search engine algorithms, the social media algorithms can definitely influence not only how we perceive, but what we do and do not perceive as well. So the book, Developing Digital Detectives, it's a great read, a great book to have on the shelf as well. And it has some excellent tips for teaching kids how to be more responsible consumers of information. So,
which is needed, because I'm thinking back to, and I can't remember if we talked about this during the episode or if this is when you and I were kind of discussing the episode beforehand, but I think back to my high school English class, and you only used a source on the internet if it was a .gov, .edu,
right?
or you learn those like 3 or 4 URL endings that if it's from there, it's trusted. If it's from anything else, you can't trust it. Well, now there's so many different ones out there, and it's beyond just a website. So you
Right.
mentioned the social media piece of it. So I can tell you, as someone who did not. Nothing against my high school English teachers. They were phenomenal teachers. They got me through, and I appreciate it. But my joy of writing a paper would be even higher nowadays, with having to decipher beyond, quoting or sourcing beyond just a website. So there's a
Your
lot.
joy
That's
of
why I
writing
like
papers. You
yeah.
really
Yeah, that's why the work that Darren has done with his book and putting out those strategies there are great, because like we talked about, it's not just something that needs to be done by itself. It's not a standalone piece. It's something that you put into all of your different content areas, and it's not just a social studies teacher and English teacher's responsibility.
Yes. Digital citizenship, media literacy, digital literacy in general. There are so many of those phrases, but they really all refer to that they kind of revolve around that concept of being conscious of the work, the media, the messages that you're receiving. So
Absolutely.
some good tips. Hope educators, if you have any questions, check out the show notes for the podcast or the information posted alongside this video on YouTube, and learn more, or reach out to us here at the LTC. So thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the LTC One-to-One podcast.
You can find and subscribe to this video podcast on YouTube,
or listen to the audio by subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This podcast was produced by the Learning Technology Center of Illinois, a program of the Illinois State Board of Education. Learn more about the LTC at ltcillinois.org.